Welcome to Crypto in America Live, the only show bringing you candid conversations on the biggest news stories, legal issues, and policy development shaping the crypto world. Every Friday at 12:30 Eastern. Happy Friday, y'all.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
We made it through the week. It was a very busy week.
Yeah. That was a good one.
It was a fun week. It was a fun week for everyone in the industry who was at DC Blockchain Summit. I think we saw like everybody we know there. It was packed.
Yes. There was a ton of people and a lot of fans of the show. So shout out to them for stopping us and saying you love the show. That was very, very appreciated.
Yes.
That was cool.
Very cool. And then a big week for us too. And in honor of that week, we have something cool coming out later, which we'll tell you guys about next week. But for this week, we also had something cool, which I think we're going to pull up right now, which was a little bit of a
we're out there IRL.
A little bit of a plug. There we go. On Wall Street, no less.
We are on literally the Wall Street station. I believe the Bowling Green station, somewhere in the West Village. I have to get out into Manhattan today and like find these for the team. And then also we will be in DC, right, Gerald and I?
Yeah.
You guys know DC better than me, so I can't state where we're going to end up there, but
be all over the place. Yeah,
there we go. Exactly. I think kind of for us, and I got to give credit to Gerald because this was originally his idea, and I was against it initially, but the idea of putting crypto in America on Wall Street, like where all money is moving and everything, was just like kind of a no-brainer for us, and then putting it in DC as well, I think speaks for itself. So yeah.
I did have a couple of my friends from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange reach out to me because they all take that subway. They all come out of the stock exchange and they all go down there and like, oh my goodness, you're on the subway. Oh my gosh, we saw you. Congratulations. So, a lot of big and important people, I think, pass by that subway every day. So exciting for us, exciting for Crypto in America, and exciting for the growth of the brand that we plan to bring more news about, in the coming weeks, coming months. So stay tuned for more news from Crypto in America.
Yeah, one step further towards global domination. Just one.
Exactly. Literally.
One early one. Yep.
Well, in the meantime, we have another big show coming up for you this Friday. We have Brandon Millman. He is the CEO of the non-custodial Phantom Wallet. He will join us to break down what the company's no action letter from the CFTC actually means. We have Solana Policy Institute's president, Kristin Smith, to discuss the SEC's token taxonomy, where Solana has been deemed a digital commodity, and Lewis Cohen of law firm Cahill, Gordon, and Reindel to break down the CFTC SEC interpretive guidance that's got the whole market talking this week. So a lot of headlines also to get through that doesn't even include any of that. Where to start? Probably the SEC's Nasdaq approval so that they can start introducing tokenized trading for certain securities. I feel like this kind of got buried in the latter half of the week after the interpretive guidance came out. I mean, there was a lot of buzz around it, but it kind of was like a news drop at like 6 p.m., I think on like Wednesday night. And it was like, oh, wow, this is actually a really big deal. Basically, market participants, Nasdaq customers will be able to opt in to have some of their stock trades settled as tokenized securities rather than go through the traditional methods. But these shares will be traded alongside the regular shares. It's not like they're creating new assets. It's going to have the same order books, same tickers, prices, and investor shareholder rights. So pretty big move here. I think it sort of is the big kind of unlock, I guess, for tokenized trading to be introduced into the U.S. public equity markets.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jackie. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll go ahead. I think, this ties into Nasdaq's bigger like tokenization plan and ties into the pilot run with the depository trust company, which will handle like the clearing and settlement of tokenized trades. And Nasdaq also filed for regulatory permission on this in September. So it's kind of interesting to see how it's like unfolded. And I believe under the framework, like eligible Nasdaq participants can choose whether or not they have their trade settled, as blockchain-based tokens or the more traditional method of what we've seen over the past few decades.
Yeah, it's not like they have to do it. They can kind of opt in. It's like, it's a pilot, right? It's basically, let's see how this works.
Yeah, so it's a pilot, and then it's also like post initial trade. So it's you basically check a box and you say, I want a token. Like you said, it's all the same rights, redemption, which is interesting because a lot of the other tokenization efforts we've seen have been some weird set of rights that are not necessarily tied one-to-one to the equity. And then I think importantly, it'll still be after T+1 settlement. So you'll basically get a token after T+1, which doesn't give us 24/7 yet, but is pretty cool. And then the other big thing that I'm not quite sure how this is going to work on yet is where can you take these tokens? So what a lot of people talk about with tokenized equity is the ability to loop it into DeFi elsewhere, and go trade it on like other platforms. So because DTC is here, because it's Nasdaq, I think it also plays a little bit into Kraken's parent company Payword distributing tokenized securities via X stocks. So they're looking at 24/7 and trading these instruments offshore, but you do need these big venues and like traditional players sort of down to have a tokenized representation of these instruments. So like a lot to be seen. Like you said, it's a pilot, but good progress, I guess, towards this march towards tokenize everything.
Yeah. Way to go, Nasdaq.
We got to have Kevin back on. We had the head of Nasdaq's American markets on the podcast. We should have him back to react to this because I think this was one of the things he said he was most excited about. This and the 24/5 trading. So reminder to get him back on for a Friday episode. Let's move on to some of the news we heard on crypto legislation this week. So yesterday I did stake out the Republican member meeting in the Senate Dirksen building.
LE exclusive.
So part of this is an LE exclusive and another part is not. So I'll start with the not, first of all, which is just sort of like an overall read on where we are with clarity and the potential for now we may be getting some merging of some provisions from the Senate housing bill now being attached to clarity. I don't know if this is going to happen, but it was discussed in this member meeting yesterday, and Politico did break this story. So in a nutshell, community banking deregulations were floated as part of the Senate banking housing bill that's actually just passed the Senate, right? But the House does not want to take it in its current form. And part of those quibbles is the deregulations around community banks. So what was floated yesterday in that meeting is actually attaching some of those community bank deregulations into clarity. So making the Housing Act easier to pass and putting some of these regs onto clarity. So who knows whether House Republicans will take that? Who knows whether like clarity will be able to pass with that? But that was discussed in the meeting yesterday. Politico broke that story. The part of this that's my exclusive is that there is also a study that the White House Council for Economic Advisors has done that examines stablecoin yields, the potential impact on deposit flight and bank lending. And apparently it is very pro-crypto. So the study that was done examines all of that. And it kind of says, not word for word, but basically deposit flight and lending is not, this existential crisis that the banks are saying it is. It's been done. It's been shared with some members of the banking committee, but the White House has yet to release it. So yesterday, some of these Republican members, Tom Tillis, Cynthia Lummis, Haggerty, I think too, they were pressing Patrick Witt to have the White House release it. They haven't released it yet. So that was my little Scoopy exclusive there. So let's see if they release that. I feel like if that is the case, then that will go a long way to helping crypto's cause. But then do we have a yield deal? We may or may not have a yield deal now. I think the news yesterday was that they're 99% there on the yield deal. So, maybe they're putting this to bed now. We'll see. But there's other areas of the bill, as we know, we heard about on stage all week at DC Blockchain Summit. There's the DeFi stuff, the ethics stuff. But I think there's been progress this week. That's the bottom line here.
Would you say more or less they were optimistic on this? Like, was the general feeling you were getting from these conversations more positive than negative?
Yes, definitely on the yield side, it seemed more positive. And then I think there was definitely a sense of like, oh, this is a path. Well, Cynthia Lummis gave me a quote when she came out of the meeting room, and she said, this is a path I would not have expected to encounter when I walked in the room, talking about possibly putting these new provisions onto clarity. Because when you talk about, adding something from a completely separate bill onto a bill that's already kind of like precarious, right? It's like, oh, this could kind of derail. So yeah, I think when it comes to yield, definitely positive. When it comes to the overall bill, I think it's still kind of, as she said, in a delicate state. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I want to point out, I think Senators Tillis and also Brooks have been working on the compromise is, as you've reported on and as we've talked about on the show before, that is like nobody is super duper happy, but it potentially gets us past this issue. And then I do want to clarify on the I know it's still classified and we haven't seen the contents of the report yet, but the Council of Economic Advisors report sounds like what it actually is pro math, not necessarily pro crypto. It's just it's one of these things where like the arguments that the ABA and others have been making for a long time is that we're going to have all this deposit flight risk and it's going to destroy the banking system. And like there haven't really been any models. There's not really been any math that shows that would happen. And so shout out to the CEA to actually do some math and some investigation here and figure out that maybe it's not quite as bad as the banks are saying. And maybe stablecoin adoption could actually be like a net benefit for the financial system, which is what the industry has been saying for a long time. And so hopefully those two things coming together, this compromise and then this new data, that maybe it's not going to wreck the banks is a pretty good sort of accumulation of this issue. And then we can move on to all the other things that we have to figure out before we actually get this thing on the president's desk. So overall pretty positive. Yeah.
Now this is economic analysis, I'm told, but is
Right.
this sort of hypothetical analysis? Because it's like stable coins haven't taken off yet. So I feel like there needs to be a period of time where we can kind of see the effects of what actually would happen or does happen. But how are they measuring that is my question. Like, where is this analysis coming from? You say math, but like, where are they finding these numbers?
We need the report. They have a lot of data. They have a lot of sources of data, but yeah, we gotta see how it works out. Because I do think like we've talked about how this was applied to money market funds in the past. They didn't destroy all the banks. Like we've talked about how this impacts community banks. And so hopefully there will be some really interesting data points that they are able to uncover with all the data that we have that they have access to that we don't, that actually proves out some of these points, or at least makes a strong argument that, the downside is not as significant as the upside for stablecoin adoption.
All right. Well, we'll see if they release it. But in the meantime, Morgan Stanley made headlines again yesterday by filing for their Bitcoin ETF, or I think they already filed, but they released some new information, which is that they are doing the ticker MSBT, and they're including a 10,000 share creation. They're also seeding it with $1 million. So it's going to be pretty significant, I think, addition to the ETF landscape that has been crypto ETFs. Morgan Stanley is not an insignificant player, as we know, but that'll be the first big bank to release a Bitcoin ETF, right? I mean, BlackRock, I think, is the most significant player on Wall Street, right? But BlackRock's not a bank. Morgan Stanley is going to be the first investor.
Yeah, a direct issuer. Yeah.
Does anyone feel like that ticker looks like MicroStrategy's a little? I know the MSTR,
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit, or maybe Microsoft as well, which is maybe
Microsoft
plenty of MS tickers. But so to Ellie's point, this is a second amended filing that they've done for the Bitcoin one. I think they filed for Solana and Ethereum back in January, but they haven't updated those. And so it's I think it's interesting to see, like we said, Morgan Stanley actually doing its own product, taking the fees, like seeing the market, when a lot of ETFs are probably not as popular just with like market conditions. Like this is more of a big financial player making a long-term kind of commitment to this asset class. And so hopefully we'll keep seeing that. I mean, obviously $1 million for Morgan Stanley is not a big seeding commitment, but it's going to be pretty interesting to see. And I think also just when I was looking through this before we hopped on the show, there's 126 plus pending ETF applications. So hopefully at some point we can start clearing through that backlog, and we'll see how it goes. But it's also, I think, important to note it was filed under GLS, which was largely replaced the 19B4 filing process. And hopefully we'll continue to see like more and more assets follow under those generic listing standards, rather than just like these core assets we've seen so far. So overall good.
All right. Is this next one overall good? Polymarket announcing the Situation Room, a bar coming to Washington, D.C. dedicated to monitoring the situation.
I the manosphere has to be happy about this one. I don't know. I saw a great tweet. Shout out, I think it was Mike McCann on Twitter this morning, saying now there will be more places for men in DC to hang out where there are no women. So hopefully, this will be like a fun spot. I think it's going to change DC brunch culture. But yeah,
like the brunch. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. Yeah,
they should make it so if you want to get into the bar, you have to like make a trade on Polymarket. There's a free little marketing tactic for them.
Yeah, just borderline casino. You have to buy chips.
Yeah, or if you want a drink, you have to make a bet. Yeah, a free drink, but it's not really free because you just paid $50 on the weather or something.
Yeah.
Now there is a public relations firm named the Global Situation Room that has sent a cease and desist letter to Polymarket over this. And so we'll see how that goes. I mean, I did point out to the person who sent me that news story. I was like, isn't there a newsroom? Isn't there a news show on CNN called The Situation Room?
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, it's a news program though. So if it was just a bar with the same name, it would be one thing, but saying come here and track global situations is where it treads into the global PR firm's territory. So we'll see how that shakes out, but it's just it's a funny, like Polymarket was obviously trying to be funny and cute.
Yeah.
It should be, maybe there will be a place for us to do a live episode and monitor the situation while we monitor the situation.
You know, if we did, if that's up and running by the time like Clarity goes to the Senate floor or the House floor or something, and we like monitor the situation from the Monitor the Situation bar. But
yeah, I will also. Okay, so one like ice cold take on this. It is going to be really problematic for DC if a staffer can leave a meeting on the Hill and walk into the Polymarket Situation Room and start hopping on Polymarket with something that they just found out.
Right.
So hopefully we'll avoid the MNPI available to the folks who are attending this bar. But overall, I don't know. It sounds cool. It could be interesting. Could be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into a piece of news that did shake up the crypto world this week. That was self-custodial wallet Phantom securing a no-action letter from the CFTC, allowing it to offer access to regulated derivatives markets without registering as a broker. So to discuss this, let's bring in Brandon Millman. He is the CEO of Phantom. He's going to break this all down and what it means for Phantom and the rest of the crypto world. Brandon, welcome to Crypto in America Live.
Hey, Brandon.
Welcome.
Hello. Morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. So there was a lot of chatter and excitement, and I think some maybe overblown takes on this on crypto Twitter, Brandon, to the point where I think even Phantom had to kind of clarify like what the extent of this no action letter did in a blog post of yours. So you described it as a first of its kind no action letter, and there's been a lot of excitement around it. So can you kind of clarify the scope of what this milestone does for you guys and really what it does for Phantom, but also for wallet providers as a category?
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, thanks again for having me on and giving me a chance to chat about it a bit more. It's something that, obviously we're super excited about, something that we've been working on for a while. And yeah, just excited to have an opportunity to chat about it. So yeah, at a high level, the news is that Phantom received, like you said, this CFTC no action letter.
Brandon, I was just going to ask, so you were making the point about not being a broker for some of these regulated markets. I was just explaining the like DCM aspect of this. So all these non-securities, but then there was an important designation that I think was first of its kind, which is a wallet getting that TSV designation. Can you like talk to us about that a little bit?
So I'm not sure exactly where I cut off, but basically, self-custody Phantom users will be able to interact with these derivatives markets. So think like call sheet or futures markets or options exchanges directly from their wallet with self-custody crypto. And yeah, basically this is a process that, folks may already be doing by extracting crypto from their wallet, making multiple bank transfers, interacting with a host of different intermediaries. And basically this setup makes things much simpler, safer, and easier. you'll just be able to open a position that you want directly from the wallet with stable coins or potentially other crypto that you're self-custodying. And yeah, basically, typically in an arrangement like this in the past, you would have the FCM or DCM, which is the actual, futures market, and then the introducing broker, which is intermediary on top that actually helps users place orders and transfer funds to the market. What's novel about this approach is that it basically brings that concept into the modern day, which includes technologies like obviously blockchains, self-custody, etc., and recognizes that the introducing broker distinction doesn't necessarily fit the mold of the technological reality of today. And so yeah, so one really exciting aspect about all of this is that the CFTC also recognizes that, and they have been having a very pro-innovation, pro-technology stance. And yeah, they recognize that a lot of their rules and licensing requirements don't necessarily, fit technology of today. So yeah, it's been super exciting.
Mm-hmm. Brandon, I know Phantom has made it clear that this doesn't cover DeFi derivatives. I think Ellie mentioned that before. So what still can't be done today? And then from the other side of the spectrum, for users, what actually changes here? What can they do now that they couldn't do before? Just like laid out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this specifically affects users that are in the US. So now if you are in the US, you'll be able to use Phantom to interact directly with regulated derivatives markets. In the US, you won't be able to interact with DeFi derivatives markets through a Phantom first party interface. So this rulemaking, or this no action letter, does not necessarily cover DeFi markets or DeFi derivatives or anything like that. So if you're a US user, you still can't use that through Phantom, but this will open access to you to a broader market of regulated derivatives markets, and hopefully also opens sort of the Overton window, or just the aperture of the discourse around what do we do about DeFi derivatives and innovations there. But it's sort of a baby step to making that happen.
Mm-hmm. How would you say those conversations are going, Brandon? Are you having meetings with the SEC and the SEC and the CFTC? I guess maybe compared to the prior administration, I'm sure it's going much better. But just in terms of like the conversation around DeFi, it's still maybe a bit of a sticky topic, maybe a bit of a, still a bit unclear around that. So how are those conversations going? And do you think that the conversation around like self-custody and DeFi is going better? Are they understanding it more? Kind of what's your read on how regulators are thinking about it at this current moment?
Yeah, well, yeah, obviously definitely a night and day difference from the previous administration's posture around digital assets and blockchain tech. Like I said, both CFTC and SEC feels like every day there's some new news out from them, which is demonstrating how pro innovation they've been. And when we talk to folks like this, I think the way that we view our role specifically is very much this educator type of role, especially as a consumer app that is actually tangible and people can play with. So it makes it a lot easier for us to, approach one of these conversations in a super productive way, show regulators, what blockchain tech looks like today. It's not the so scary experience from 10 years ago. I think a lot of their perceptions are shaped by, a lot of outdated notions. And so, yeah, we can show them, what sort of the modern day on-chain finance experience looks like, that's sleek and mobile, et cetera, with consumer protections and things like that. That's a big topic for them, as well as, and a lens that they take when they approach all these conversations is around consumer protections. And so obviously being a consumer product, we're able to communicate with them, a lot easier than say, a protocol company that's a little bit more niche. So yeah, overall super bullish on everything going on, and yeah, really proud to play our part in moving all this stuff forward.
Yeah, Brandon, I know one of the big aspects of the no action piece seemed to be the self-custodial nature of Phantom. Like that was a pretty big piece, and I'm sure it took some effort to get the CFTC's head around sort of the wallet architecture that you guys were using. And one of the things that maybe this opens up from my perspective, because I obviously got a lot of questions internally on this when the no action letter came out, was this could potentially open the door for others to like maybe like a MetaMask or some, I guess, more self-custodial wallets like that to be able to plug in. Obviously, I think the industry is kind of over relying on like similar facts and circumstances to be able to do stuff. So, you know, obviously this really just applies to you guys for right now. But how do you think self-custody will play into this and business models like this versus maybe like more custodial interfaces and the rules that apply to them? Like how much of your technology stack was like a differentiating factor here?
Yeah, so I guess just to address the first part of what you said. So one of our goals with this was to do something that really helped further the ecosystem, and really wanted to position this as something that was kind of helping to lead the way, or a template that other people can follow. Obviously, it's not a full rulemaking or legislation, so it cannot necessarily be relied one-to-one from another party. But you know, I think we did a pretty good job in terms of trying to make it templatizable enough for other you know, the members of our industry. In terms of self-custody, I think basically, you know, there's always going to be a world where there's self-custody solutions. There's always going to be a world where there's custody solutions. Our goal is to make all of the experience and technology around self-custody match the ease and safety of use that custody can provide, while maintaining sort of the core aspect of self-custody, which is literally, you know, you custody your own assets and your control of your own assets. And yeah, I do think that because that's such a different concept, you've never really been able to connect to the internet with self-custody assets in your physical wallet before. You know, it's just kind of breaking a lot of regulators' brains around what that actually means. And so I think we'll still be in this period where there's going to be a lot of education needed for regulators and consumers. But I'm pretty optimistic that, you know, self-custody tech is basically going to be as invisible and as seamless as normal custody tech in pretty short order.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Brandon, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon.
And congrats again. Yeah, big milestone.
Take it easy.
Oh, thanks.
All righty.
That
So
reminds me to check my Phantom wallet. I haven't done it in a
Don't
long
lose your keys.
time.
Don't lose
Yeah,
your
there we
keys.
go.
Yeah.
Alrighty. The SEC CFTC interpretive guidance included 16 crypto tokens as examples of digital commodities, including Bitcoin, Ether, XRP, Doge, Cardano, and Solana, offering long-awaited clarity to many projects that were previously sued by the SEC as unregistered securities. Kristin Smith is the president of the Solana Policy Institute, and she remembers that period very well. Kristin, welcome back to CIA.
It's great to be here. Thanks for reaching out and having me on.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
It was Salt, Wyoming, right? When we had you on the podcast for the first time. Feels like a long time ago now.
We were sitting
I know, it was
outside.
nice to be sitting around the fire. I think we're all in our hotel rooms or wherever we're at today. So
Except when we were getting attacked by sprinklers, if you remember that.
yeah, and some people cut in and walked and cut us off. But
Yeah. Well, let's start with the guidance, the interpretive guidance, because that's sort of been the killer headline of the week, I think. But at a high level, in your view, what do you think has actually changed here? And what do you think people should be paying attention to that might not actually be like as obvious just from sort of the headlines and the media articles from this week?
Yeah, well, I think back to not even the Gensler years, but like the Jay Clayton years when the ICO boom was happening and all of these projects were issuing white papers and issuing tokens. There were a bunch of questions around how the securities laws apply to crypto. And so you had all the crypto lawyers that were going out there trying to look at the case law, look at what was happening, and make their best guess. I think we would have killed for something like what we got this week that many years ago, because it would have prevented a lot of the litigation that happened during the Gary Gensler administration. So I think this is a hugely significant piece. It's I think it's about 68 pages long. It's very substantive. It defines 5 different categories of digital assets, and 4 of those 5 categories are not securities. It's pretty clear about that. It goes on to name some tokens like Solana that are part of ETFs, as specifically being among the many tokens that are not securities. But more importantly, the thing that had confounded the crypto industry for a long time, that there was a lot of discussion about how to navigate, is the Howey test. And that's where you have an investment of money into a common enterprise where you expect a return based off of those efforts. And for the first time, the SEC has explained a workable pathway for how to deal with that. And it essentially comes down to, what are you promising the project will do? And once you've fulfilled that promise, then you are no longer part of an investment contract and can move forward. And so I think it's incredibly encouraging. I think there are obviously additional steps we want to see, and we've the chairs of the agencies have talked about doing follow-on rulemakings to make this something that has some ability to some staying power. But I think it was an incredible step forward, and also very complementary to the legislative process that's going on right now.
Mm-hmm. With this in mind, Kristin, how does this guidance kind of impact how exchanges and trading platforms and those kind of ones that are, listing products, especially things like derivatives or tokenized assets?
Yeah, I think that today the exchanges have a pretty robust process for doing this, and have taken, particularly in the last year, a more aggressive approach when it comes to listing new assets. And so I think this will give them more flexibility going forward. I think the audience that is most impacted by this are potential builders of new projects, because they have a pathway forward in some guidance to look at when trying to figure out, how to go about structuring, raising money to build their project, and what that pathway looks like. And so I think this should spur new projects and new innovation here in the US.
Yeah, Kristin, on that point, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on like the legalese of some of the like funding arrangements that we use now, but like you mentioned, sort of the ICO period, we've moved on to like a safe warrant structure for a lot of projects that obviously does include an investment contract, but then potentially ends, and then the warrant, when the network is launched, effectively investors are, I guess, not losing rights, but are changing into a different type of interest in the project. And then I know the SAFT was also like explicitly mentioned in the guidance. When you say new builders approaching fundraising mechanisms, like, how do you see this playing out? Do you think there's going to be maybe opportunities for projects to be lighter touch on the initial kind of things that they're putting out there, or that largely maybe this will remain similar in the way that you're kind of raising from the DevCo with equity, and that's clearly an investment contract, and they're moving beyond that? Like, how are you thinking about how that plays out?
Yeah, well, I think, right now, in the absence of legislation, this is a pretty open-ended, almost choose your own adventure type style of fundraising. So I think I actually think that the SEC putting this out there should incentivize Congress to get the legislation done, and actually, I think particularly puts pressure on the Democratic side to get things done. But no, I think this will provide some more flexibility that doesn't exist today. I think that it allows projects to define what they want to build, and not have to tailor what they're building to a specific like decentralization milestone. And so I think that I think a lot of it is going to the investor is going to need to like look very deeply into what they're building and what they're promising, and to make sure that makes sense. And so I think investors, professional investors, but if this reaches retail investors, need to look very, very closely at these things. But I think it should provide a lot more flexibility and not have this situation where projects either choose to just not launch to begin with or to go overseas to do it. I think this is a real strong signal that we want this innovation here in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we mentioned that Solana having digital commodity status, obviously it's a big unlock for clarity, Kristin, and for so long, so many projects were kind of operating under the question, am I a security, am I a commodity, am I something in between? But is this more so just kind of like clearing up, what the crypto community already sort of knew, that a lot of these tokens are not securities and are actually commodities? Or does it actually sort of like fundamentally change things in the ecosystem for some of these projects? So like Solana being a commodity, that doesn't change anything for the ecosystem. It's kind of just business as usual. It's like, okay, we know what we are now and we can move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen, we've thought Solana was a commodity for a long time. We thought it going back many, many years now, but particularly when the ETFs went live this past fall, that really kind of confirmed the status. But it's very helpful for the SEC to say that. I don't think, people talk about this world where we go back to, Gary Gensler's twin brother shows up and is running the agency. And I just think, the passage of the Genius Act, you have a lot of blockchains out there where stablecoins are being issued on top of them. And, you're not going to want to have that sort of disruptive litigation that you had in the past. But no, it certainly was wonderful to see that in there. And I think that, the one thing we've learned with the securities litigation over many years is that it turns out the crypto lawyers were right. There was a big difference of opinion between how the SEC was viewing the application of securities laws and how the courts or how the crypto industry were. And, in most of those cases, the court sided with the crypto industry. It turns out we can hire some pretty smart and fancy lawyers to figure all this stuff out. And so I think it's just really reassuring to see the agency do this, and to do it in a way where both the SEC and the CFTC are on the same page. They're agreeing to the same taxonomy and the same framework. And it's just a really refreshing way to deal with regulators, as they're trying to figure this out. Now, obviously, there's more steps, like I mentioned. We're going to want to see rulemakings that put some of this into, officially onto the rule book. And rulemakings are important because it takes a long time to do a rulemaking. And then to undo that rulemaking, it also takes a long time. And so it's not as sticky as, say, a legislative fix is. But I think that, this is a really nice way to get the process going while Congress wraps up the work that it's doing on the Clarity Act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kristin, so to change, Jacqueline, go ahead. I think you're going to ask this.
No, you go, please.
Okay. Well, we were told that you're speaking at the American Banker On-Chain Summit later on today. I believe a panel with someone from ABA. Are you going to be talking about the stablecoin yield debate at all? We know that's been a hot topic, especially on our show, but definitely in the crypto industry as a whole. What can we expect from your panel later today?
Yeah, I imagine that is a topic that's going to come up. I was on the train yesterday coming up to New York, and sitting across from me was Nick with CoinDesk, who's going to be our moderator, and he more or less told me that he's going to be opening with that question. So I think that listen, that the Clarity Bill is at a hugely important moment. We really, want to see this bill enacted. This bill has the potential to be very, very good for crypto. It is very good for Solana. There are some details that need to be worked out. There are essentially sort of 5 big open questions. And to get to the other 4 questions, we have to solve the reward yield issue. And I know there are a lot of discussions going back and forth between the banks and crypto, and I think most importantly, Senators Tillis and also Brooks in the Senate. And so, I think that there's a lot of progress. It sounds like they have text. I don't know anyone who's seen the text, and I've talked to a lot of people. And so we need to, make sure that this is something that is workable. But I think I'm very encouraged by the level of attention that this is getting in the Senate right now. And if we can get that piece done, then I think some of the issues around the tokenization language, the DeFi language, some of the Title I issues that deal with disclosures and who can do those, those are separate conversations that are moving along, and they're moving along fairly well, I think. They're not maybe perfect, but I think the dialogue is very good, and so I'm optimistic that those issues will get addressed. And then ultimately, there's the outstanding kind of ethics issue with the Trump family businesses, and I think that is probably the last issue that is going to get fixed. So, I mean, listen, this is like really hard stuff, right? Like, bills don't just pass. Like, we've talked about this before. Like, I think this is incredibly ambitious, but all the pieces are there. The sort of political dynamic is there. The policy substance is there. We've got the right members of Congress in both the House and Senate in the room. We have the White House in the room. This is a recipe for an environment that can get a bill done. And so I think that the pressure is on, and hopefully we will see some developments in short order here, because at some point there is, it does take time to get these things through the committee and through the floor and then back over to the House, and we want to make sure that there's enough runway between now and the end of the Congress to get a bill to the president's desk.
So with all this in mind then, Kristin, what would be the timeline that you have for actual clarity to come through?
Well, so the Congress goes through, the end of the year, I guess technically like January 3rd. And the big wild card is the Congress going to do anything in December? Because you could very well have a final House vote on an identical bill or something in December. But the problem is that's not a guarantee. So you really want to scoot it up to the fall. Congress in midterm elections tends not to be around in Washington much during October. So there's that kind of September window there. That's a really tight window, because that's when all the appropriations bills need to get done and they have to fund the government and everyone wants to get out of town. But again, there could be time for a vote there, but I don't think we want to have to depend on September. So that puts us into, we really need to get this through by the August recess, which starts in early August. That's when Congress goes home. And so, that's 2 weeks in April. It's a couple weeks in May, a couple weeks in June, and a couple weeks in July. So there's time there to do it, but we got to start doing that. If you recall, with the Genius Act, that took about 4 weeks to get through the Senate floor, and this is a significantly more complicated piece of legislation. And so we want to get the bill out of the committee as soon as possible, so that they can begin the process of working it through the Senate floor.
So, Kristin, one of the dates that we heard thrown around a lot this week was like June, July, and it sounds like if you had to put it on over under to be like signed on the president's desk, it sounds like you're a little over on that.
I think we have a little bit more time. I mean, listen, time pressure does like amazing things, right? Like, we can debate something all day long, but when everyone has their plane tickets and they're ready to get on a plane and go back home, sometimes they just coalesce around and knock things off the to-do list and get it done. I do think, some people have said, well, the midterms are starting now, that this is kind of the time, like, if we don't get something done immediately, this is sort of the time where everything jams up. But I think crypto is a unique issue in that there is bipartisan interest in getting something done. And so compared to like a typical issue that is maybe more partisan, I think that, we have a little bit of a longer window than a different issue might have. And so, again, we don't want to like play with fire here. We want to get it done as soon as possible. But I do think that, if we can get it out of committee, by the end of April, there should be plenty of time to complete the rest of the process.
All right, we will see. Kristin, great takes. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, to wrap us up, let's get Lewis Cohen in to come and talk about all of this stuff. He is, Lewis Cohen. We've had him on the show before. He's great.
Friend of the show.
He's
Yeah.
the New York crypto lawyer, aka Cahill Next Own. Come on in, Lewis. Good to have you back.
Hey, Elliot, guys, thank you so much for having me. And this is a great conversation. I agree with a lot of what Kristin said, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about the SEC guidance. I think the way I look at it, guys, is it's an amazing bridge toward clarity. The Clarity Act is the real solution here. I think what the SEC is doing with this guidance is helping people sort of make it from the current state to that state. The challenge here is there's a little bit of a sleight of hand going on. It's great that the SEC has confirmed that most crypto assets are not themselves securities. But if they have these promises or representations following them around, then the transactions are securities transactions and all the same rules apply. So we have a little bit of Heisenberg's uncertainty theorem here. I think the hope and the idea would be for new projects that they be very precise about what promises they're making when they start, when they end, and everybody knows. But guys, it's crypto, right? Never works that way. There's all the legacy assets. What were they saying? What did they do? What did they mean? Are they being, trailed around by their promises and representations that are as yet unfulfilled? And for new projects, there are a lot of ways things happen. So things that concern me here are the potential. We know that the SEC did a great job by confirming if a promise or representation is made after a sale takes place, nobody's relying on it. Totally fair. Great point. But many projects do multiple sales. So let's say you do that big initial TGE sale, half your supply, great, raise tons of money. And then, 3 months later, you do a much smaller little sale, but you make some promises or representations there. All the tokens are fungible. Did you just have sort of the carry, the hand coming up from the, oh no, you're back to being a securities transaction? There's a lot of uncertainty in terms of how this works. So it's a fantastic effort. I can only commend the commissioners and the staff for pulling this all together and getting it done. But we just need to move toward clarity. This is not an end state. It's not an end state where people can have certainty about what they're dealing with. The other concern I have, and Gerald, I know you and I have talked about this a bit, is around disclosures.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I think is absolutely inadvertent here, but if the standard for something falling into that securities transaction bucket is that the issuer made representations and warranties, then what we're going to see is very skinny disclosure. And we've seen this with some of the sales on big exchanges, very, very little information. But we know there's much more information. We know VCs get lots and lots of information privately and not widely disseminated. That's not an end state we want. We want everybody to get equal and similar information. And the Clarity Act would do that. It would provide a common set of standards. And most importantly, it wouldn't put people at risk for having securities transactions for their securities by being, clear about what they're doing.
So you're saying because this framework is, or the projects in crypto, it's sort of not one size fits all, right? I kind of look at this thing and it's like, it is almost like you can't write this broad crypto framework to fit every single project. And a lot of the token investment contracts, when you say it's ended, right, that's very subjective. So how does the SEC kind of square that? I mean, if a token project comes into them and says, how do we know when our potential investment contract is supposed to have been reached? Like, this doesn't really kind of answer their questions, right? Is that a complaint, or is that something?
You're right, Ellie. And look, we hope everybody is straight up and down the middle. I made a very clear, I did a token sale. I made some very specific promises. We'll have the, canonical bridge to L1 set up. They make a very clear promise. We'll have the canonical bridge to mainnet set up by the end of the second quarter. It's the end of second quarter. The bridge is up. Great, wonderful. But sometimes projects can be a little loosey-goosey about things. What if a project says something's been fulfilled, but everything, I'm not so sure you fulfilled that promise there, buddy, right? How do we interpret that? Are we now free from being securities transactions? And one of the most important things is that there are many market participants for whom it really matters. If you're a broker, a dealer, a market maker, many different parties, you need to know, are you engaged in securities transactions or not? And if you're not sure, you're going to err on the side of caution. And what I worry about with the framework is it's going to pull, actually, ironically, much more back onto the security side. I think with the Clarity Act, we'll have much more clear and bright line rules. So again, I want to emphasize this is a fantastic effort by the SEC. I just don't think it would be a real shame if this was an end state, because it would really, I think, clutter and create a lot of noise as people try and figure all these points out. So yeah.
Yeah, Lewis, I want to dig into the disclosure piece and the I guess number of parties who are involved in a lot of these like larger ecosystems, right? So we've talked before about in this legacy model, maybe it's a foundation or it's another entity that actually launches a token. It's the labs co that's making a lot of these initial promises that you're talking about to the private market investors. And then even if you're looking at a secondary sale on exchange later, it's probably not the labs co that's selling that. So like, how do you think this gets squared? One, with just the legacy model where there are a lot of entities involved and who have the potential to sell a digital commodity or a network token, versus like what we're actually going to be expecting from all those different parties if we get clarity or just operating under this guidance.
It's a perfect question, Gerald, and you're right. The concept of issuer in the guidance actually includes people who are affiliates, which is a very broad group. People who are promoters. I don't know who's the promoter. Is a VC fund a promoter? People who are agents. Oh, you did a token swap with somebody. Are they now your agent? They're going around promoting that. KOLs. KOS. Are they? Where's all this going? So I think that raises a lot of concerns about who's going to be doing what, who's responsible for what. And I think ultimately what we're going to see is a bifurcation. The YOLO projects are going to YOLO like they do and just not care at all. And I think what concerns me is the well-advised projects are going to take conservative views and find themselves actually in a much more difficult position post this guidance than they were before it, because now they're going to be asking all these really challenging questions about, am I responsible for that statement or not? Was that person an affiliate? Were they deemed to be my agent or a promoter that I'm responsible for? There's, and again, when do these promises begin and end? And there's new promises. One of the things I think people forget, crypto is software, and software is never finished. People are constantly iterating, and there are teams, and we look around, right? We want people to iterate, we want people to develop, but these are large teams. Very often, labs will have 100 or 150 people working for them. Saying that there's no managerial efforts there, really? There's nothing anybody's doing over there. So I think, we don't want to scare that off. We want the people, the builders, to build. We just don't want them to be worried that if they talk about what they're doing, all of a sudden they're going to backdoor into being subject to securities regulation. And I think Clarity addresses that. I think this is a great start. And hopefully, like Kristin said, it's a bridge to really provide that impetus and drive everybody forward. And let's just get Clarity done is the message.
Yeah, Lewis, I mean, the idea that a token can be sold as part of an investment contract is something that, the prior SEC under Gensler pushed for, and it's not included in the Clarity Act as is. So why do you think they chose to reinforce that here instead?
It's a great question, Jacqueline. And I'd say it's because it's the best available choice to the regulator. Congress's job is to fix the law. The law doesn't really cover that situation. And I think the SEC is trying to find a way to sort of say, look, there is stuff going on, and we don't have a means to ensure that investors are protected. So we're going to just say these are securities transactions. There's no law. Let's be careful. And I think you guys know, we wrote this giant article, Ineluctable Modality of Securities Law, and we went through every securities case. There's no Howie case that implies that an asset that's not a security sold later is somehow trailed around by its promises. That's just not a thing. It's great, and I applaud the creativity. It's trying to solve a problem of how do we fit a square peg and through a round hole. And I think it's a good effort, but it leaves so many interpretive questions on, well, how exactly is that going to work when you get into the details, that really what it is best viewed as a bridge toward clarity rather than, I think, a long-term end state that people will have to, or if it is, there'll be a lot of guidance and a lot of nuance and frankly, a lot of paying lawyers. I don't want you guys to have to pay me. Go do your stuff, build your stuff. Don't go hire expensive lawyers, right?
Yeah, Lewis, I know we could talk for a long time about this, and we will. It's at another point, but before we let you go, I want to ask you something about what you said on more compliant, sort of well-backed projects getting stuck or sort of pigeonholed here versus some of these projects that will YOLO or like may decide in the end that even with this guidance, like an offshore model is better for them. One of the takes that I've seen out there is that this actually could incentivize projects to go with a more limited scope of promises to begin with, right? And so how do you think that this how do you think that we fix that element of it where, you know, I'm just, hey, it's a network, read the white paper, good luck. Like how do we square that?
Yeah, it worries me, Gerald. I mean, we've seen, well, we won't name any particular projects, but we've seen some large scale projects go out with very, very limited information. I don't think that's good for the market. I don't think it's good for the project. I think we want to be able to tell the people in the space what we're doing, how we're developing, how we're responding to new developments in the market. Everything's changing. Imagine if Uniswap stopped at V1 or V2 and didn't continue to progress. We want and need that development. If what we're doing is scaring people, saying, gosh, if I tell people where my roadmap is going, all of a sudden now I'm going to be, you know, potentially bringing my token back into being, you know, part of an investment contract transaction. The people aren't going to say that. They're not going to say it publicly, but they'll probably tell their venture investors, they'll tell folks. You know, one of the scenarios, Gerald, I wondered about is, let's say, you know, you're at a conference, right? And, you know, somebody says something at a conference and, you know, Nick Day is there, right? And he picks it up and reports on it. Is that the kind of promise? And you say something, you know that reporters are in the room. It's now widely disseminated. Did that just create a new promise ahead of a token sale? There's just going to be, and again, the YOLO projects were YOLO, but the well-advised projects will, oh my goodness, what do we do now, kind of thing. And we don't want that. We want people to know going in where they stand and allow them to build and grow the space, and just, you know, get stuff done.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we'll get more clarity, and then we'll be done with that word for a while. We'll see. But yeah, really enjoyed the conversation and look forward to talking again soon. Thanks, Lewis.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, thanks,
Appreciate
Lewis.
it.
Yeah, we got to have him on for a full hour.
Yeah.
He's so entertaining. I love
Yeah.
the energy. Yeah.
All right, guys. Great show today and good job this week.
Great week in DC.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
yeah, good day.
Until
See you
next
guys.
time.
Next time. All right. Bye, guys.